and welcome to 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking three powerful questions. I'm your host, Rachel Vogel, and joining us tonight is the one and only Lauren Christy. Lauren is the co-creator of The Matrix, the trio that wrote and produced the worldwide phenomenon Avril Lavigne's Let Go, which included 3 international #1 hits and sold over 25 million copies. The Matrix also received 7 Grammy nominations, including Song of the Year in 2003 for Avril's Complicated, and again in 2004 for I'm With You, along with Producer of the Year. Lauren is only one of 2 women to ever be nominated for producing acts other than themselves. Along with Avril Lavigne, The Matrix has sold more than 30 million records, working with other artists like Jason Mraz, David Bowie, Ricky Martin, Rihanna, and the list goes on. Lauren's recent independent work includes Enrique Iglesias with his worldwide #1 hit, Tonight I'm Lovin' You, Kelly Clarkson's I Forgive You, Dua Lipa's Blow Your Mind, and many other hits from artists like Chris Medina, BB Rexa, Korn, and more. And don't worry, the work doesn't end there. She recently started her own record label called Youth Be Served Records, which has so far signed 4 artists. So without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome her to the podcast. Lauren, thanks so much for being here. How's it going?
Good. Thanks so much for having me, Rachel.
Of course.
I'm exhausted just listening to that.
No, you should be proud of yourself. Alrighty. So with that, let's get right into question 1. Imagine for a second you're sitting down with your 25-year-old self. What one piece of advice would you give her on a personal note? And what one piece of advice would you give her from a business perspective?
Okay. The piece of advice I'd give myself as a 25-year-old personally is, Lauren, God is real. Put God first. Stop worrying. I had a pretty radical encounter with God when I was about 42. And I feel really sad about all the nail biting and worrying that I did about how I was going to survive in the music business and how I was going to make it. If I'd have only known back then that God was real, I would have been better off, because I would have known that kind of there was a path carved out for me, and I wouldn't have taken all the anti-anxiety meds and antidepressants that I took. And so that's my personal thing, is just to have faith. I would tell myself, have faith, Lauren, it's real. And I come from a family of atheists. So it just wasn't part of the equation for me back then. And if I hadn't had this encounter with God, I'd still be there. So that's the one personally for me. Professionally, I would say these are all important things that I talk to my own daughters about, or anyone I meet in the music business. Write your own checks. Watch over your finances carefully. It's not what you make, it's what you keep. Live small. You don't need to live in a mansion. Don't give a fuck about who doesn't like you. Know your worth. Don't care about 1,000 no's. Just look for that one yes. Not all money is good money. And lastly, sometimes the most powerful word you can use in entertainment is no. That would be my advice to my 25-year-old self.
That's great advice. That's great advice. I'm going to take all that. So you started out, didn't you start out, you wanted to be an artist, and that kind of led you into songwriting. And so how did you kind of land into production, and what age was that? And how did that kind of shift your whole career?
Okay, so I mean, Ed Eckstein and Tom Vickers brought me out to America, and I spent from like 23 to 28 really trying to make it as an artist. And at some point I was just traveling so much, performing, and it had always been in the back of my mind that I really wanted to have children. I've always wanted to be a mom, and I was kind of confused as to how I was going to really make it if I did, to the point where, you know, you can, if you're, you know, a huge star, you can probably take nannies on the road, but that wasn't a reality for me. And so I was like, how am I going to do this? And the segue was, I was out of my deal with Mercury. I'd made 2 albums. The second one had not done as well as I'd hoped. And I went to London and to meet an A&R guy. And the A&R guy said to me, can I have that song for Natalie Imbruglia, the artist? And I was like, oh man, he doesn't see me as an artist. I'm too old. You know, I think I was 29 at this point.
Oh my gosh.
And I remember sitting on the plane coming back, and I just thought to myself, look, I'm not going to be bummed out about this. I'm going to make a transition. I'm going to change direction right now. And this guy who had sort of become like a hero to me was Max Martin and his company Sharon. And I thought, you know, I'm going to do exactly what he's doing. And I got off the plane. My husband picked me up, Graham Edwards, my ex-husband. And I said, Graham, let's go behind the scenes. Let's be like Max Martin. And we teamed up with our buddy Scott Spark, and that's how the Matrix started. And we pretty much like dropped being artists, all of us, immediately.
Do you ever look back on that and wish like what could have happened, or you're pretty content because you've had a lot of success?
I'm content. I'm really content. I love to sing though. So I do sing almost every day in the studio. So I still get to do that. And then I always feel that God gives me like a little moment to perform. It always happens. I got to fly to Ukraine and sing on X Factor, my big hit in Russia called The Color of Night.
Oh, wow.
I'm big in Russia and Ukraine.
Wow. Okay.
So back in Ukraine, God bless the poor people there right now. I got to perform now. It's such a beautiful city. And then recently I got to perform for Nancy Pelosi at like a big fundraiser for her. I sung Complicated to her. So I always get these moments where I get to get up on stage. So I feel like I'm still an artist, really, you know.
And your daughters are in a band?
Yeah, they're called Sky Christy, the band. They're both their middle names, Georgia Christy and Sophie Sky. So it's Sky Christy, and then they say the band afterwards, so people don't get confused and think it's a person. But they're just on the beginning of their journey, and they're really committed, and it's a crazy time to be doing music, but it's kind of I think they'll be in it for life because they're really great songwriters, and they're really great producers too. Their single Black Lake, they co-produced and co-wrote. Wow. And they've got single after single coming out, and they're all over TikTok.
Yeah.
Days. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. Well, they have a great teacher.
I try to teach them.
All righty, moving along. Question 2. Every industry has its dirty little secrets, and we both know that it is no different in the music industry. And sometimes people think that's a bad thing, but that isn't always the case. Sometimes they can be good. What's one secret you would like to share with our listeners about the industry?
Okay. The dirty little secret I'll reveal about the biz is you need to be a producer as well as a songwriter, as well as being a songwriter. Streaming today doesn't really work for songwriters financially. It's challenging to make a life for yourself being a songwriter these days. And that wasn't always the case. But now with the digital streaming platforms, it's been a blessing for the listeners, but not so much for the songwriters. But if you're a producer, which I came in, my success came as being a producer / writer, then you can share in master ownership, and you're compensated properly for your time and your talent. So I encourage all young songwriters that to kind of work on your production skills, and because it's a tough business if you're just coming in as a songwriter. It seems glamorous, but it's not that glamorous if you're just a songwriter today. That's really important to me. Also, am I allowed to do 2 little things?
Of course, you can do as many as you want.
Okay. So the other dirty little secret, but it's not so much this. It's my father, Brian Founds, told me a little saying, which has stuck with me my whole life, re-entertainment, but it probably could be applied to anything in life. This is it. If you have talent and energy, you can be a king. If you just have energy, you can be a prince. But if you only have talent, you'll probably only be a pauper. So the most important thing to have success in this business or in life is energy. And so I try to get up every day and be enthusiastic about everything I do. And how does that pertain to being a dirty little secret? I would say that in this music business, I've met many, many people throughout my 4 decades in the music industry who were very successful, but only moderately talented. But their energy made up for any lack in talent. And this includes myself at times. There are days when you just don't have the juice. But if you bring energy and good vibes to a room, everything is elevated. So sometimes you got to just be the cheerleader in the room.
Right. That's great.
It's all about energy.
Yeah, I think, and that applies to like anything in life. If you have energy, that can't get you everywhere, but it can get you pretty far.
I've met some of the best songwriters, but it never happened for them because they didn't really believe in themselves, or just didn't have the gumption to get up and do this.
Right.
You know? So I think that's so important. And I try to do that all the time. Just believe in yourself. Go. Let's go.
Absolutely. And as like a woman in the music business specifically, and you're saying, you know, get into production and work on your production skills, do you think that that's a bit harder sometimes for women to get in the door? And what's your advice for that?
I mean, I don't think it's harder. I just think it's kind of a bit of bro culture in the music business.
Right.
But I've never had a problem. You just got to do it. You start off with, you know, back in the day when I was starting out, I had a 4-track, then I had a 16-track, and then I learned to use Pro Tools. Now I know female producers, Keto being one of them, and she told me she started off on Fruity Loops. I was working with a great artist yesterday, Tilly, and she was like, had her headphones on, creating beats to the track we were working on while we're in the room. And she's like, great, I'm going to come up with keyboard ideas and send them back to you. So I just think if you want to be in it, just put your foot in the door and go for it.
Absolutely. That's great advice. Last question. Throughout your career, I can only imagine that you've been asked a lot of questions, whether it was for an industry conference, the media, or even in one of your songwriting sessions. But throughout all of those interviews and all of those questions, I'll bet there was one that you have never been asked, but would have liked to. So what is that question, and what would be the answer?
Okay. Lauren, would you like to spend a week in Hawaii creating with Nile Rodgers and Kate Bush? Yes. That I would love that question to be asked to me. But on a serious note, I think it would have to be, Lauren, how can we help young people in entertainment with their mental health? I think it's a really tough industry to be in, and I see so many people suffering with depression and anxiety, and I've had some experiences with this, and I'd love to help in some way. And obviously, I think what people should do is seek professional help. Don't keep things bottled up. Just like you express yourself with your music, you need to express what you're feeling and talk to a counselor or talk to a mentor. So that would be the question I'd like to be asked, is how can we help people with their mental health?
Absolutely. I think that's great. And especially that can go for artists, that can go for executives, it can go for anybody. Yeah. That's a beautiful thing. All righty. Well, Lauren, it has been wonderful having you on tonight. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. And to all of my listeners, I know you enjoyed hearing from Lauren just as much as I enjoyed speaking with her. So stay tuned for next week's episode of 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking 3 powerful questions. See you next time.